Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and today I'm with Scott Weldon, the awesome writer of Harlan Buck, and he's going to tell us. Well, hold on. Let me start over. If you like what's going on with this channel, please hit like, subscribe, and pass it on to your friends because I want to bring on more awesome creators like Scott and so many others. So, Scott, do me a favor and do us all a favor. Tell us about yourself and tell us about your creation.
All right, so my name's Scott Weldon, and I have kind of a very convoluted past, but I've always wanted to be a storyteller. I used to want to draw comics when I was a kid, as 11, and I wouldn't actually start doing comics until I was 41, when I started doing indie comics. I'd kind of given up on the whole thing. Like, I'd gone in and out of writing for years, trying to figure it out. Like, I was stupid. Like, I always tell people, don't do like me. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out myself. And like, I didn't want to take classes and I didn't want to study. I wanted to just like learn it, right? Magically, like, by trial and error, like reinvent the wheel. Don't do that. It's dumb. I wasted a lot of time doing that. But I would go in and out, right? I would cycle in and out, and it would take a long time for me to get to the point where I could finish stories and feel good about what I was writing. And then I thought I was going to do some prose because I didn't need a team. I didn't need an artist. I tried writing prose for a while, but it just never really clicked. I did some short stories, but it just never really sat with me. And I knew, like, in my heart of hearts, that I was a comics guy. I just knew I'm a visual storyteller. I love comics. I started out wanting to draw comics before I started writing. And but I kind of gave up. I had given up on writing for like 7 years. I hadn't written barely anything. Every once in a while you'd break stuff out, maybe edit, go over some stuff, try and get that spark back, but it just wasn't there. And then I actually got on Facebook, not for comic books at all. I got on Facebook for gaming, like tabletop gaming. Right. And one of a friend of a friend, I found out was making his own indie comics, a guy named Shane Will, and it blew my mind. I was like, this guy's making his own comics? He's putting his own comic books out? And so I reached out to him because I'd met him before. Like I said, we had friend circles that were interconnected. And yeah, and he was making his own comic books, and he knew a bunch of other people making his own comic books. And that blew my mind. It never occurred to me that I could just make my own comic books. And I was in a place in my life where I had the resources and the means. And so I hooked up with him for about a year, rolled with him and his CK Comics crew and Scattered Comics, which is out of Sacramento here in California. And, went to conventions and learned how to work on comics with them and learned how to network with them. And I did that for about a year. And then things started to slow down. His personal life took a turn, as it will for all of us. And hooked up with him for about a year and started to slow down. And so then Dino, my artist, Dino Agor, who's in the Philippines, he'd been hitting me up on Facebook wanting to do something with me. But since I was working on Shane's stuff, I kept kind of putting him off, and I didn't have the money at the time, the resources in place. But then as CK Comics started to slow down, I finally, Dino reached out to me and made another pitch. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. But we're not going to do superheroes like I've been doing with CK Comics. I'm going to do something completely different. Right. And he was down for it. And so that's where I actually pulled Harlan Buck off the shelf. So Harlan Buck, Free Sword, that character actually was born in 2004. And we didn't do the comic book till 2016. And I had tried messing around with him with some short stories and prose and stuff. But funny enough, I actually never finished any of his short stories. I would write scenes and start something, but I'd never finish with them. But I had a really good idea of what I wanted to do with the character. And I felt a lot more confident in my writing now that I'd spent a year doing comic books. And I actually wrote a lot more comic books than we ever published. I was way ahead of the curve. And so I got a lot of practice in, and I was feeling pretty good and fairly confident that that I wasn't lying to myself all those years when I said that comics was my medium. Right. I felt no, this is where I should be. This is where I should have always been. Just like I believed. It ended up being true. I just felt comfortable and I felt confident. And Harlan Buck was a character I knew the best. And he was a solo character. So that's so much easier to start. If you're going to go down the path on your own, it's so much easier. I love team books, love them. But that's a lot of work. you got to come up with a lot of different characters and backstories and interpersonal relationships and different character arcs if you want to do it right. And I just wasn't ready to handle all that. But I understood the character of Harlan Buck enough that I felt really good that I could do something with that. And so I actually pulled the character and made some changes specifically for the comic that are different than what he was in the prose, because of the freedom I felt like that I could now do more with this character and a support cast. And so, yeah, I built him up and I built his supporting cast up and I launched that. And so to summarize Harlan Buck, man, he is a mercenary with a conscience, basically. He doesn't see himself as a good guy, but we meet him at a time in his life where there are other people that see him as a good guy and are trying to convince him that he's a hero, that he's a good man. He just doesn't buy it. He doesn't believe it very much. And so this is my homage to my love of old Western characters, the classic gunslinger archetype. It's a fantasy story, but it's low fantasy. And I really pull a lot of themes and tones and vibes from Westerns, but I throw everything in a blender. Everything that I like, I find a way to get into my comic. And that has to do a lot with, I spent years, I wasted 10 years of my life writing, trying to be original, right? Trying to come up with something nobody had ever done before.
Right.
And of course you fail because it's all been done before. But it would just discourage me. And I'd always anytime somebody would be like, oh man, this really reminds me of this and that, then I'd just scrap it. Like I felt like I was a hack. But with Harlan Buck, I took the opposite tack. I took everything I loved and said, I'm going to pour everything I love into this character, this concept, this comic book. And I don't care. I'm going to do homages to stuff that I love. I'm going to borrow themes from stuff I love. I'm going to use archetypes from stuff I love. And I'm just going to do it. Right. And then funny enough, now people are telling me how original they think my what I to myself was my most hackish, least original idea. But because, and this is what you learn as a writer, right? Because it's your voice, it's your characters, it's your story. It doesn't matter if you're using classic themes or classic archetypes or classic plot devices or tropes. It's the delivery. It's your voice. And once you find your voice as a writer, then that's what sets you apart.
Yeah. Now, I got the first 5 issues. I read them, really enjoyed them. Awesome stuff. Thank you. No, it's for me to thank you, because I can't tell you how many times I get stuff and it's just why?
It's a hit or miss game.
Yeah, it is. But all the issues are standalone, which are mad cool. I'm just wondering if ever in the future are you planning on doing maybe a longer series with Harlan?
So here's the trick. So I bamboozled all of you. I faked all of you out. So I understood from my lessons learned in CK Comics, I understood that if I wrote long arcs, hey, I like episodic. I'm a Monster of the Week fanboy. If I watch a show like Supernatural, the Monster of the Week's my favorite episode, right? I was when X-Files was a thing back in the day, right? I like those Monster of the Week episodes. My long arcs, I want to be character development relationships. I'm a huge fan of the original run of Chris Claremont on the X-Men. And what I always felt I was drawn to was those characters changed over time. Storm went from this goddess to this badass punk rock ass kicker who hardened to the world and hardened to the role of a leader. That was a cool arc. That made her amazing to me. Wolverine, I miss Samurai Wolverine. You know what I mean? The guy who stopped wanting to kill people, the guy who wanted to be better. In fact, I steal some of that in Harlan Buck, right? I do it a little different, but I steal that notion that he doesn't take killing lightly. Now you read a modern Wolverine and he just kills people willy-nilly. He doesn't care. He doesn't have a conscience. But I hate that version of Wolverine. It's not my version. I like that those characters evolved and changed over time. I loved watching Nightcrawler get assigned leadership of the X-Men and not know what to do with it. And be insecure about it, but then having to take on that responsibility, watching Kitty Pryde to literally grow up, right? That stuff's cool to me. So that's what I want for my long arc. but I also understand that like there's big gaps as indie comic readers, right? I didn't want to make a 4-part story that has you waiting 3 years for the conclusion, right? It just doesn't appeal to me as a writer, and it doesn't appeal to me as a reader. So write what you love, right? So that's what I did. But I still faked you all out because the first 5 issues is only 4 story arcs, right? 2-part first, and then single. And then 6 and 7 still follow the same format. It feels very contained. We get to number 8, which is our next release once COVID-19 lets us do that. And I have call outs to every single story arc that came before. It might be super minor. It might just be a cameo of a character that we've seen before or a reference to something. But some of them are big. Some of them are like huge. Like if you haven't read what before, you won't notice that it's connected, right? I still have that ability to keep the story contained where a new reader could just read it and enjoy it for what it is. But if you've read the series and you get to number 8, you're gonna be like, oh, that guy, oh, that what? And you'll see that I am connecting it. Right. I just didn't want to start that way. I wanted people to be able to come in with any issue. You've got them. I don't even put the numbers on the cover. You know, people ask me all the time, where do I start? And I tell them, start where you want to. If you like them, you can get more. Right. But on the inside, in the fine print, I tell you what number it is. Like the people that need to have numbers, they're there. There's a reading order to it. And I do the old classic pulp. There's a season and a year that it was released. Some people are able to figure that out and put the order together on their own. So yeah, you get rewarded if you read it in order. You get more if you stick with the series and keep reading, and you'll start to see these connections and you'll see the character growth and development over time. But if you just pick up one and you get a contained story, that's great. That's how I want it to be. Is be welcome for somebody to jump in at any point in the series, but if you stick with the series, you're going to get rewarded. I promise you. Yeah, that's it. I mean, you can see where the breadcrumbs, you're laying out your breadcrumbs. You're like, all right, little guy, just keep following me. No, right? No, but it's cool, though. You understand? I mean, when I started the Oswald Chronicles, I originally started as a series of short stories. Right. And they were all self-contained, and that's how I sold them. But it was prose. Comics came later, and then things just got weird on me. Yeah. So, things just happen like that. So, all right. So obviously you said you had this renaissance a few years ago where you came back. So where did Scott where did you, where did little Scott, pick up on this stuff? Like what was the stuff that the real genesis of where you started? Like I know you mentioned the X-Men, but I mean there must be other things that mixed in there. Well, see, what's funny is my mom was an avid reader, and she read comics as a kid too. And she was like, she wanted us to read. She didn't care what we read. So I literally have gotten comic books for as long as my memory serves. Like I've always gotten comics because my mom would get them for me. But like I used to get like Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and G.I. Joe, stuff that was tied to the toys that I played with or the shows or movies that I liked, right? And I just got them willy-nilly here or there. Like I didn't care. But I didn't read superhero comics. Like which is funny. Like I never really thought of that actually until the last couple of years. How weird that is. Like because superhero comics is what made me fall in love with the media, but that's not really what introduced me. It was these other ones, right? But what happened is when I was 11, when I was in 5th grade, a buddy of mine brought X-Men comics to school, and he brought X-Men 207, which is like Wolverine tearing down. I have it somewhere around here. This is the comic that changed my life, right here. Armada Jr. Comic book. I read that comic book, and it shouted out to a big deal thing that happened before that issue, but I didn't care. It was so amazing, and I didn't know comics could be like that, and I was really impressed by it. And then he told me about this place that sold all comic books called a comic store. I didn't even know those existed. And so this guy, he's the one that kind of opened the doorway with me, and he actually gave me that comic, or we traded for it, or kids, we trade stuff. And I got hooked, and I started going down to the comic shop and buying more X-Men. And the comic shop I would go to, this is when I was living in Southern California, Hawthorne, California. there's a place called Bob's Comics. I seriously doubt it exists anymore. It is the classic old school, dusty old.
Right.
Shop, right.
You got that smell.
And the guy behind the counter we called Bob. He wasn't Bob. We don't know who Bob was. But the guy behind the counter was the grumpy old man. Like, it was right.
Right.
But they hadn't raised their prices on back issues in like 10 years. And this is like 86, man. Right? So, like, I could still get 35-cent, 40-cent, 50-cent back issues when cover price was 75 cents. So I could get back issues cheaper than cover price comics that were new on the shelf. And then here's the real magic. So, like, I would work odd jobs when I was a kid. I could work around the neighborhood. I'd mow lawns. I'd wash, cars. I'd babysit. But there was a rich kid at my school who liked my comic books and wanted to buy them from me, but I loved them too much. I was like, hell no, man, I'm not selling you my X-Men comics. But he said he'd give me $3 for a brand right off the shelf X-Men. I was like, what? Okay. So this would last for like half a school year.
Right.
X-Men issue. This cat would buy it off me for like $3 or $4. I would get on my bike after school and I would buy that issue back and go backwards. I actually spent my first 6 months as a die-hard comic book geek going backwards faster than forwards. And it changed my life, man. I loved comics after that. Like, I love the medium. I started drawing comic books. Everything changed in one school year, like with the introduction of the X-Men. Yeah. And then I became a total Marvel file, like total Marvel fanboy. I didn't read DC comics. They were the enemy. Even like the alternate books. I did read some indies from here and there. Like, I did read Black and White Ninja Turtles, but my staples were like Marvel, X-Men, Spider-Man, but I would read Alien Legion, which was the Epic line, but Marvel. I would read Conan, but technically Marvel, right? So even though I was still reading non-superhero titles, it was still under the Marvel umbrella for a long time. But I would get the occasional indie book, if it was something that was cool, that caught my eye. But mostly, I was a Marvel geek or its affiliates. But I would say X-Men, Spider-Man, other Marvel superheroes, Savage Sword of Conan, and Alien Legion were like my jam that really sucked me into the world of comics.
Gotcha. Now, you were saying like there were 1 or 2 indie books. You mentioned the Turtles. Were there anything else that struck your fancy at that age?
Nah, because we dabble a lot. We had 25-cent bins and stuff, so you could go through there and find something cool. Or I remember getting like a spoof X-Men comic called Shmen. Like, they just took the hyphen out. So it was just random stuff. Like, most of it I don't even remember. I only remember Turtles because I remember when I'm old enough to remember when Archie bought them, and I was like, sellouts. I hated the Archie, like the Turtles that most people would grow up loving. I was like, this is stupid. Like, Raphael, like, he beats people's ass, he cusses, you know what I mean? It's like, I was totally like very punk rock about the Turtles going to Archie Comics and becoming famous.
Gotcha. Now you say you're rolling into number 8. You got 9. I think I saw you say that you have 9 and 10 brained out.
Yeah,
right? Not necessarily written out.
I just need to get the work done. Like I was telling you before we started the show, like I'm really slammed at work, so it's impacting what I can get done here at home. I thought like, hey, we're gonna be locked down. I'm not gonna be gaming with friends or hanging out as much. I'll get all this comic booking done, but I've actually been really slammed at work, and real life gets in the way. This is something that all of us indie creators deal with. We would love to be able to create all the time, but we got to deal with real life. And so real life's keeping me busy. But as soon as I get the opportunity and things slow down at work, I'm going to roll out number 9 and number 10 and just keep going forward. I'm not going to be able to go as fast as I was able to at the beginning, but I'm just going to do, keep making comics, right?
Right. Now, when you were working with your buddy, like how many books did you guys produce, between you and him and I guess the crew that you were working with?
Well, as a whole, that was what got me kind of started trying to go fast is, I can't remember, but we cranked him out. Like we were knocking books out. I don't know how he did it. Like none of us knew how he did it, but we were cranking books out pretty fast. in that year, I think we put out like 4 or 5 books within the crew. Yeah, and it was a lot. It was a ton. So I came into the scene like with this fast production concept. So for me, when I started making my comic book, I was like, I got to do at least 3 a year. If I don't do 3 a year, people are going to lose interest. They're going to get bored. They're going to fade away. Like I didn't buy into the like one comic book a year thing would work. And now here I'm in a position where I'm like, I haven't done a comic book in a year, and yet people are still into what I've done because I've laid that foundation. So I'm glad I started fast. I'm glad I was able to get that foundation laid out. But the book didn't really start picking up until I had 3 out. So like it's important to get those early issues rolling. But now that I have the foundation, and I'm able to kind of slow down as life has forced me to slow down. But I still have loyal fans now. So like I keep having new people jump on. So having the solid foundation helps. It helps calm me down that I feel like I have to, go, which just at some point is unsustainable. Financially, it's unsustainable. Time-wise, it's unsustainable. It just, I spent the first 2 or 3 years, just trying to go zoom though.
Well, it's awesome books. I mean, that's why you're going to retain your fan base, because a lot of people, good books, hard to come by. So everybody's going to remember, and they're going to keep coming back.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I have been really kind of overwhelmed in this last couple months. How many fellow creators in particular keep saying really good things about my comics? Because Chuck Pinot, he'll tell you, man, I'm like every other creator, man. I have my good days and I have my bad days. I get insecure about stuff. But one of my big insecurities is I'm like, my comics are really simple. Like it's a really, simple, it's not epic, it's low stakes. Westerns aren't that popular. Low fantasy is not that popular. Low stakes is not very popular. People like epics. People like, these big intricate stories. People like big cast. People like blockbuster feel. And mine feels like an old Western series, just with swords. Well, at least that's what I tell myself, right? And so I'm kind of always underestimating how much people will like it. Like it's kind of like this constant nag for me, and it's true of all creators, right? We all do this to ourselves. But for me, like part of it is I'm like, but this isn't what's popular, right? But I've been really, I've gotten a lot of support from the indie community, a lot of really nice things said about what we're doing, and I have a good team. Dino's fantastic on the art. Avery does cool stuff on colors, and so the book looks good. They make me look good. It helps. Art always sells a comic book. I couldn't sell the comic book to people if the art wasn't awesome. That is still, a big sell point is the good art. And then the word of mouth. I mean, those are the two things that are kind of sustaining this right now. And, I've had to kind of accept that, maybe I am pretty good at this. I mean, I would have done it anyway, right? I'm doing this for myself as for anything. But I think I'm finally kind of coming to grips that maybe I'm not bad at this, which is good and bad, right? Like you don't want to get cocky. Luckily, I won't get cocky. It'll drive me. It'll make me reassess a whole story. Like I'll reassess a whole story now going, well, but is this strong enough? Like, it's going to live up to what I've already laid out. Like I got to keep doing good. I got to keep raising the bar. And so, yeah,
I try to go.
I'm happy.
I try to the simple credo as a writer. I try to do is that today I'm going to be a better writer than I was yesterday, and tomorrow I'm going to try to be a better writer than I am today.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
And that's and it's just me. I'm not looking to be better than anybody else. Just me. I want to be better than myself.
No, exactly. I'm not competing with anybody. Like I'm not. Like sometimes I might be feeling it some days. Like I might read something I don't think so good. Like I've had a few times, and I'm not talking about other indies. I don't really I try not to even really compare. But I remember reading like a couple old X-Men of that Claremont run that I love so much, and be like, I could write better than this. This isn't your strong stuff, Chris. I can beat this. And sometimes you get a little cocky. That's the funny thing about being a creator, right? We pendulum swing.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, we're gonna come in and out. You understand? We're gonna always like self-doubt. You know, some people say it's bad. I say it's good because
Right.
you always have to remember. I run by Sturgeon's law. 95% of everything is crap. Okay, you have to make a serious effort to get into that 5%.
Right.
You know, and that's how I view it.
I accept with my own comics. Like I accept, like one of the things that helped about going fast, and this doesn't have to be a go fast thing, but I knew that I was going to stick to this, right? Like I knew that I was going to be hard headed and keep making comics regardless, like because I wanted to tell my stories. I've been waiting 30 years to make comics. I've been waiting 20 years to tell my stories in this setting. You know what I mean? I'm going to do this. So I knew I was going to stick with it. I knew it. I was like, I think at the beginning I told myself I'm going to do at least X number, right? And I picked some random ass number. I don't even remember what it is. But then me and Dino, by number 5, me and Dino are like, when we get to number 10, like when we get to number 10.
Right.
And just, you know, I knew I was going to keep going. So, but I knew what I always wanted to do was an ongoing series, which is stupid in indie comics. It's dumb to do an ongoing series. You should do short stories. You should do stuff that can be packaged into trades. Like, I am not doing smart indie comics, but I'm doing the comics I wanted to make. And I'm telling the stories I want to tell, and I'm doing it like, because if I'm going to emulate a 17-year run on X-Men by Chris Claremont, who is probably, as far as comics go, my biggest influence, right? How am I going to show you years-long character arcs if I'm not spending years working on the book? Like, I knew that if I do this stuff fast, it has no impact, right? The big critiques I have about amateur writers that are learning the ropes, like we're still learning, right? You're always going to learn. Even when you're a pro, you're always going to learn. But we're learning at an even steeper curve, right? Because we're not in the industry. We don't have editors breathing down our necks. You know, we're not having to meet, a corporate standard. Like, we're doing our own stuff. So, like, we're our own bar for success or failure. But like you said, like, that you got to keep trying to up your game on your own. So one of the things I have to accept is not every comic book I do is going to be amazing, but that doesn't mean you don't do it, right? Like, you still do it as long as you can find a way to tie that in and make it work, and you learn something from it, and you plant seeds in it that you can then, reap something from that later. Like, it's funny because a few people will look at me like, I've had a couple of people look at me like I'm crazy, but I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do with number 4, which is funny because that's actually the one you used in your banner that we put on Facebook. But Manhunt, like, there's stuff I wanted to do more, but I was like absolutely adamant. Like, I keep my page counts, right? Like, I won't exceed 24 pages. That's my max. Don't do more than 24 pages. So if I can't cram it in 24 pages, it's not going in. And so I felt like there was some stuff I wish I could have built more tension. I wish I could have showed a few more things, but I just didn't have the space in that book. And I didn't have enough for a 2-parter, but I didn't have enough space to do quite everything I wanted to do. But I've had a few people look at me like I'm nuts because they really like that issue. But for me, I felt frustrated, but I did it anyway because I had my deadline. It needs to be done and out by this point. I had already scrapped one script, and I was like, nope, I'm finishing the story and I'm putting it out. And it goes back to that adage, finish not perfect, right? And you'll learn more by finishing a project, even if you're not 100% happy with it, than you will by quitting and starting over again and again. Unfortunately, I didn't learn that lesson until I was in my 40s. But it is actually legit. It is so legit. And so, I just, sometimes you have to accept that it's not going to be everything you want it to be. We're never going to make this stuff perfect. There's always going to be something wrong with it. I only have one issue that I think hit all the story beats I was going for. Every other one, I'm like, it could have been better. Could have been better. But you do it anyway. And then where do you get better? Well, you get better with the next one, and you get better with the next one after that, and you keep learning, and you keep growing, and you keep mastering your skills by actually using them.
Yep. I mean, the old adage goes, it says, art is not finished; it's abandoned.
Right.
So you have to abandon the work, and it's just the way it is. You got to give it up. So okay, let me move on to the next thing, and then you just try to make that one better than the last.
Yeah, I mean, look at George Lucas. I mean, people love to pan George Lucas, for me included, by the way, for remaking the original trilogy and adding scenes and stuff. Like, I hate that stuff. I think it's terrible because it's not what I grew up on. But I have come to understand where George Lucas was coming from when he did that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he wanted to perfect it. It was never what he wanted it to be. Walt Disney with Disneyland, it will never be done as long as there's imagination in the world. Like, he was always going to tweak it. As long as he was alive, he would have tweaked Disneyland. He died pretty young, all things considered. But that dude would have kept, he was building Disney World. He was, Disneyland is awesome, but let's do even bigger. But it's the same thing, but we're going to do it even better. Return of the Jedi, going back to Star Wars, Return of the Jedi is Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But done better, right? Jabba's palace is the cantina the way he wishes he could have done the cantina, right? The lightsaber duel on the Death Star is the lightsaber duel he wishes he had at Star Wars. That's what we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want to one-up ourselves. We always want to improve ourselves. And that's part of why I wanted to do an ongoing series, because you would see that growth and progression within the actual story itself. So I wouldn't have this complete story that I look back on and just frown on and go, that sucks. I've done all these other things and they're better. I love ongoing stories, but I also like that as a creator, you would see my progression as the book went. And I could see that progression. And I think, you've seen the first 5. I think you do see it improve as it goes, and that includes my team. Dino's art gets stronger, Dino's colors pop, and I got to remember to keep my screen alive. But yeah, I just think that if you just keep working, and that improvement shows in the work that you do, and I think that appeals to me as part of the ongoing process.
Now, so let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, process. Now, what's the process you do as a writer? Like, how do you work with your artists? Are you giving them full scripts? You go panel by panel? Or you work in Marvel style? And I know you like to keep tight. So, how exactly is Scott working it with your artists?
Yeah, I'm crazy. I'm a control freak when it comes to my stories. Not control freak, as in I don't let Dino have any freedom. But what I mean is, I like things, I'm telling my story. I want to hit certain beats, certain ways. And so, yeah, I do a full script. And luckily for me, when you work with your artist, figure out what works for you and your artist. Dino likes the extra guidance. He's an artist that works better under that. In fact, he doesn't always like coming up with cover concepts. He's the reverse of most artists.
Right.
Most artists just want to do pinups and covers. Dino just wants to do pages. He doesn't want to do pinups and covers. He does them, but he's not always happy with them. He's his favorite thing to do. He wants to write. He wants to draw, pages and panels. So it works out that way for me, because then I can give him that guidance and he's okay with it. If I work with a different artist, they might not like it, but it works for me and Dino, so it's great. So I do a full script, but the way I do it is kind of weird because I'll do a plot concept. So I'll lay out my plot in just bullet points, kind of rough out the story flow I want, and thumbnail the whole comic book, every single page of the book. I visually lay out, and then that way I can get my pacing and my story beats, my page turns, all of that stuff in. Gotcha. But I don't give those to Dino. I don't give him the actual thumbnails. I give him the final written script. What I use the thumbnails is I actually do the plot outline, do my thumbnails. I push the plot outline out of the way at that point. And when I'm scripting, I'm actually looking at my thumbnails as I script. And I get really methodical, actually, about my setup. I plot, thumbnails, then I only do panel descriptions. So the first pass I'm working on my script, I only do the panel descriptions. I won't write any dialogue in. And I won't do the dialogue until the entire comic book is laid out and panel descriptions are all done for the whole book. And then I go back and then I do the dialogue for the whole book. And I edit every step of this process because I hate rewrites, like passionately hate rewrites. I hate redoing work I've already done. So by doing it in sort of like this procedural method, I can tweak when I'm doing the plot outline, I can tweak it. When I transfer the plot outline to the thumbnails, I can tweak it. And I don't mind redoing thumbnails. I can redo thumbnails as many times as I need to. That doesn't bother me. I don't like rewriting, so I try and get all of it worked out storyboard wise. Then when I'm working on the script, I edit again, I refine again, but I'm doing that in the process. And then when I go back and do dialogue, that might require more edits. It might change the pacing of a page layout. It might change the number of panels I need on the page. So I allow each step to do edits as I go, but I try and hash out most of the work during the storyboards.
Gotcha. Now, I see in the books that you actually letter your own books. So during the letter, because I letter my books as well, and I always use it as an extra step for edits. So I mean, do you go through a similar process? You're sitting there, ooh, let me just fix it.
Will interpret a panel differently than I imagined it, or he would not leave me as much space as I wanted. Because did I mention I like Chris Claremont? So like I can be wordy. I joke that every issue has like a Chris Claremont page, and you've seen my comics. There will be at least 1-2 page conversation that looks right out of a Chris Claremont, right? It's a ton of conversation in like 2 pages. But I actually kind of relish that challenge though of being able to edit while letter, which is a big reason I like at first I just did it because I couldn't afford another person on the book. But then as soon as I realized that power it gave me to have another line of editing and refinement of the story, then I'm like, now I don't know how I give it up.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm the same way. I use that extra step. It's funny. I like the way you have yourself well structured because you structure yourself in a 24-page, very tight box.
Yeah.
I'm the exact opposite. I go all over the box. I'm like, I usually write freehand. So I'll just grab a book and I'll just start writing all freehand, and I'll write out the whole story, dialogue, script, everything, and I'll just pump it all out, and I'll give it to my artist. Say, here you go. She says, how many pages is it? I don't know. Figure it out.
Yeah, that's rough.
But no, that's how we work, and I've worked with her for a long time.
Your artist is down for. That's the thing, is you have to find an artist that works with your style and is comfortable with it and likes that. Yeah. Like if I had an artist that I felt I had a good connection with and they wanted more freedom, I'd have to find a way to give them that more freedom, or find a new artist. Not because we have a beef or there's an ego thing. It's being able to work together cohesively is important. And so for a guy like me who likes extra control, having a guy like Dino who likes extra guidance, it's a fit. If I learned a trick at CK Comics. This is a good trick. We would give guys that would come hit us up and they wanted to do comics. A lot of times these guys were beginners. Like they didn't really have any experience. They drew and they drew well, but they hadn't really had any comic experience whatsoever. So we would give them 6-page short stories as a primer to test what they could do. And man, I pissed some artists off in those days. Because they would come back and I'd be like, hey, you didn't nail the story point. Like you hid this. This was really important to the story I'm telling you, and you didn't draw it, or you hid it behind a character, or you didn't do a very good job establishing. This was supposed to be an establishing shot, but we don't see any back. We just see a brick wall and some heads, man. Like it doesn't tell us anything about. Oh yeah, like I would come back and I'd critique those guys hard, and but you would wash out the people that were real amateurs, like legit, like, just wanted to do this for fun. You know what I mean? And didn't realize how hard sequential art is, because sequential art is hard. If it wasn't hard, I'd be drawing comic books.
Exactly.
I used to want to draw, and it was hard. And I was like really good at drawing like a dude staring at you in a cool superhero pose. The end. Like I wasn't good at anything else. Like I could fiddle part around with other stuff, but I just wasn't good at it. I struggled with all sorts of things that you need to be able to do sequential art. It is a brutal, brutal form of artwork that asks a lot of an artist. They need to be able to tell a story. They need to be able to evoke emotions. They need to be able to consistently deliver the look of characters. They need to be able to draw everything under the sun that our crazy asses will come up with. Like every time I make Dino draw a horse, I feel bad for the guy because horses are notoriously horrible for artists to draw. There are a few exceptions out there in the world where artists are fine drawing horses, but for a lot of artists, they hate it. And poor Dino, I'm constantly giving him. Anytime I see somebody critique Dino's horse, I just blow that off. I don't listen to it at all because I know it's hard. And I don't hold back. Like I don't edit something out of a story because I'm wondering if Dino can draw it. I just ask Dino to draw it to the best of his ability. And sometimes I have to accept when something's hard, but other times I'm able to come in and like I might be able to guide him. He might come and go, hey, like I'm not feeling this page, you know, and I might be able to show him the thumbnail I did, or I might be able to do a sketch for him that helps better get across to what I'm trying to show him, like that maybe the words didn't hit the spot, you know. Yeah, but that's the key is we ask a lot of the artists, so you got to be able to work with them and meet them in the middle sometimes and find ways to make their job easier because we ask a lot of them.
Oh, we do. I know I do with my artists. I mean, you know, I think I asked her one time, say, okay, I have a scene where a god needs to reach through space and time and they need to, you know, tear a hole through the fabric of reality. So there you go, knock that out. And she did it. You know, so I was just like, okay, this was actually the first story I ever did with her. And I said, okay, we're set. You know, we can be together.
Yeah, what's funny is like character design process. I'll tap other artists for that sometimes too, just to get different takes on things because it's nice to get different styles and approaches to characters. But with me and Dino, a lot of it depends on like how important the character is to me or how clear or visual, how much like information I can give them on the character. So we were working on characters on the other. I was like, I don't know, he's just kind of a big dude. He's a tough guy. He's got hair.
Right.
You know, I don't care. Do whatever you want to with them. Like, you know, I'm not that interested in that character. I just need him for this one scene, whatever. But other times I'm like, okay, here's my sketch of him. Here's photo references. Here's body type. I want this kind. Oh man, I will run him through the ringer. Like we were just doing female character design, and I was like, she needs a reverse triangle body type. So broader shoulders, narrow hips. She can be buff, but not too buff. And like I'm like being super like nitpicky. Like no, Dino, you don't understand. No, you did an hourglass. She's not an hourglass. She's got to have broader shoulders than her hips, narrow her hips down, man. Less curve in her hip. Like, you know, like it just really depends on like how clear a visual I have of these characters. So, and other times I'm just like, yeah, do whatever you want to do, man. Just as long as they're in this ballpark, we're good. Do whatever you want. So so he gets a little of both. He gets a little of me beating on him, taking him out exactly what I want, and he gets me going, hey man, just go with it, have fun. And it works out sometimes because in that same issue, Manhunt, spoiler alert, the villain, Jorgen Skinner, that guy was meant to be a throwaway character. Like whatever, monster of the week, I don't care. And he just needs to like have a cool like, you know, animal headdress thing, you know, one or two. It was not very detailed. I gave him a couple of photos that were kind of give him that frontiersy feel that I wanted. Right. I was like, whatever, like I don't care. Then he comes back with this killer character design, and I was like, maybe I don't kill this guy right away.
Let's keep him around for a little while.
Keep this guy around because Dino did a killer character design. Yeah, so you guys might see Jorgen Skinner in the future.
That was a good character.
Yeah, and that's part of the cool part of the collaboration, right? Is sometimes artists bring something to the table that you just never saw, and then you, as the writer, fall in love with their interpretation of a character, right? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I work with my wife is also an artist. She draws another book that I do with her called Tall Tales, and I've told her and a couple other friends. I said, look, it's very rare that I get very specific and I want to see a very specific thing in a scene, but when I do it, I write I give a massive amount of information for that scene, right? And then I never, ever get back what I want. But you know, but they surprise me with what they give me. You
Yeah,
understand?
that's the thing. Yeah, sometimes it's a pleasant surprise. Sometimes you're
Exactly.
a little frustrated because you're like, oh, I really wanted to Jim. I wanted it. Yeah, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And since I'm not doing it myself, I'm not going to push them any harder. Like
Right.
you learn when to step back and just go like, just take it. But yeah, there's other times though that they'll do stuff that you're like, I did not see that coming. That's cool. Like, in the very first issue, when they're falling down the cliff together, when Harlan and Kendall fall down the cliff, the way Dino drew that was nothing like I imagined it in my head. But it was really cool and dynamic, and I was like, oh no, I like this. This is cool, and like that was kind of one of the moments where I was like, oh, this is gonna work. Like this is gonna work, because that was a pleasant surprise. Like I said, the character design on Jorgen Skinner, like the way he drew that character, I didn't see that coming. And it was just, you're like, I'm not going to waste this really cool character design. And that's part of the fun. I don't know about you, but like another thing that I like about doing an ongoing series, which again, if you're thinking about doing indie comics, don't do an ongoing series. It's stupid and it's financially not smart. But what I like about it too is I can change as I go. I can change my mind. I can come up with a new idea, insert something different. So I have all these ideas, like all creators. I have all these ideas in my head for story. Like I have so many story ideas. I have at least a dozen story ideas that I want to get to at some point. And I know I'm going to come up with more as I go, right?
Right.
But I'm very flow driven. I'm a flow guy. I'm all about flow. So I try to approach each issue going, what is the next issue I should do? What is the next piece of the story I need to tell? Or what is the next piece of the story that I think fits well with the course of events that are happening so far?
Right.
I never try and shoehorn stuff in, because every time you try and shoehorn stuff in, it shows, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I just like things to feel really organic and natural, and each story to flow. You haven't got there yet, but when you get to 6 and 7, it feels like the book takes a real big, hard change where we get more high fantasy elements in there. But I set it up at number 5 by Harlan's walking away, right? So when you get to 6 and 7 and he's off in the woods somewhere, you don't know where he is. Well, he just walked away from a really hard scene at the end of number 5, right? Yeah. So the idea that this guy might be out in the woods just clearing his head, getting away from it all makes sense. Like, so now I can do this crazy story that seems out of nowhere after I set up all this very, humble, realistic frontier world, and all of a sudden here comes my take on magic with 6 and 7. I've set it up where I've given myself the opportunity where that doesn't feel jarring. Yeah. As far as the flow of the series goes, right? And so I'm always doing that. I'm always like giving myself wiggle room, like when to put stuff in and when to put stuff off. Like I have I don't know about you, but I usually start with a scene and then build stories around scenes I want to do. Like I'm not sure how other writers work. I'm not really I'm not writing epics. So like I usually will come up with a scene and go, oh, I really like this scene. How do I make that scene work like in context? And so I have like scenes that I've role played out in my head. Like I've had whole conversations between Harlan and Kendall, or Harlan and Lil. I can't wait till I can put that in a story. At some point, I don't know if that's going to happen. I'll feel it. Like I'm very intuition driven, which is funny because I'm a super analytical guy. And I told you like how methodical my process is, but I'm very intuition driven. I just go by what feels right and what I feel like feels organic and what flows for me, despite all that other structure I talked about. That structure all comes once I've settled on what I want to do, but how I get to what I want to do is super intuitive.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I've had, for Tall Tales, there were scenes literally sitting in my skull for like 15, 20 years before I wrote them.
Yeah.
And they'll just sit there and they're like, these things, they're just nagging at you, says, go do this.
Right.
So
the first thing I ever wrote in prose for Harlan Buck, like the intro of Harlan, I love it. Like I absolutely love it. And I'm like, it has to make it into the comics someday.
Right.
But did it happen in the first 8 issues? No. Do I know whenever I'm going to steal this scene I originally wrote in prose and put it? No, I have no idea, but I want to. It's just, I just got to find the right time and in the right place. And I was talking with Chuck the other day. We pay him a lot. And I was telling him about the scene that I had in my head between Lil and Harlan. And I was like, I can't wait till I can get to that scene. But I have no idea when that's going to be. But what's cool is by knowing I want to get there, then I can lay the breadcrumbs, right?
Exactly.
Teaching things that will allow me to set up going, okay, now it makes sense for that moment. I kind of got off course, but I was talking about amateur writers that we were talking about, and I started this thought process a while back now and got distracted. They set shit up.
Right.
They go right for the big moment. And I hate seeing that in any book, because as a writer, I'm going, I see what you were doing there. And that could have been a really cool moment. But because I don't really know your characters very well yet, and I don't really know your setting very well, and I don't know what the norms are and what's special and what's, like, you haven't created a norm for me to know how big this moment's supposed to be. I only know it's supposed to be big because I'm a writer.
Right.
And I see what you're trying to do. But as a reader, as a fan, I don't care. I don't care that your guy just sacrificed himself, because I just met him. And so that sacrifice doesn't have any emotional gravitas for me. Like, I'm not invested in the character, so his sacrifice just falls flat for me. Or, oh, I get it, this is the big reveal of the villain, but we're at the end of your first issue, man. Like, I haven't even invested in your hero yet, and here's the big reveal of the big villain. And and I get everybody has a different style. Like, I'm a guy who doesn't like 90s superhero comics. I mean, I got driven away from Marvel, and I only lasted with Image for a year before I just gave up on all that stuff. And I started reading completely different comics in the 90s. I went to Dark Horse, Techno Comics, all kinds of stuff like that. So I get that there's an entire group of people like action-packed, no fluff, no breadcrumb trail, get right to it, pound face, action and adventure and big moments, and they enjoy that, and that's cool. But I'm not that guy, not as a reader and not as a writer.
Yeah, neither am I.
Be invested, I want to care, I want to give a shit about the characters. Like, I'm talking about this off and on Facebook. Like, the character moments are what I like as a writer. The action adventure is icing on the cake, and like, the action adventure is easy. Like, I love choreographing a fight scene for Dino and see him draw it out and make it look amazing. I mean, I love that stuff, but it's not my favorites. It's not what I'm thinking about on my walk home from work. It's not what I'm thinking about when I'm taking a shower. It's not what I'm thinking about when I first wake up in the morning and I've got my comic books dancing in my head. I'm thinking about, what the next conversation Lil and Harlan are having, or, when is she going to let him off the hook for the end of number 5? Or when is he going to have the courage to, say more than he has to her? Or, when is Kendall going to finally just tell Harlan, man, you're full of shit, I'm calling you out on this? Like, when is that going to happen? Those are the moments I think about, is these interactions between these characters. That's what drives me to write the next story. It's almost never an action scene or a monster of the week. Tack that shit on after. Like, I build these soap opera moments and then build the story around them.
Yeah, Dave Sim had a very interesting take on it. He said, think of it like this. How many times a day do you get punched in the face, as opposed to how many conversations you have?
Right.
And that's what it is. Life is about conversation. Once in a while, you may get punched in the face, but, those are special moments.
I know what it feels like.
Unfortunately, so do I. So, it's happened a long time ago, thank God. So, I mean, we've been at this for almost an hour. So where can people find your stuff, Scott? Where can people find you, and where can people get in touch with you?
Well, as you know, I'm active on Facebook. On Facebook, I'm Scott Eos Weldon on Facebook. That's my personal account, which, me, I talk almost 90% comics and geekery. I only occasionally deviate to talk about other things, and even those are often geek related. And then we have a Weldon Studio Facebook page, which is dedicated to the comics. And then www.weldonstudio.com is the website where we actually have the comics, and you can actually order them from that website direct from us, and I'll mail them out. I do everything in print. I don't really have much in digital yet because I'm old-fashioned. But yeah, www.weldonstudio.com. That's where you can find our stuff.
Cool. Now I got two last questions for you.
Sure.
All right. Two last questions for you. All right. So here's the first. And okay, so if you had your druthers, right, anyone living or dead, right, that you think, with all due respect to your artists, your current artists, let's leave them out. If you had a choice of any artist to do a cover for you, living or dead, we could pull them out of the ether, who would you pick?
So here's the funny thing. There's a bazillion artists that I love. I'm actually more inspired by artists than I am writers. My list of artists that inspire me is longer than my list of writers that inspire me because, like I told you, I started out wanting to draw. But for pure nostalgia reasons, I would either want Paul Smith or John Romita Jr. because their runs on X-Men are the runs that made me fall in love with X-Men. So just because of that, I would probably pick one of those two.
All right, cool. Now, if you had the golden ticket to Marvel or DC or both, and they came to you and said, "Listen, Scott, whatever you want, pick any character, any team book, anything, which one you want, except for the X-Men because we already know."
So, I don't know that I could salvage the X-Men. I'd be like, can I have the X-Men where Chris Claremont left the book? Like, do that timeline.
So which book? Who would you choose to do?
To be honest, I wouldn't. I thought about this a lot. Like, I know a lot of people, and when I was growing up, I wanted to draw for Marvel, right? But the truth is I don't really want to write other people's characters. Would I? Like, if this came and landed in my lap and they said, "Hey, man, we'd love to have you do X character for Marvel. Would you do that?" I wouldn't care who they give me. I'd try and figure it out. I'd be like, "Yeah, give me the shot," just to see if I was man enough to do it, so to speak. Right. But the truth is, as a creator, I like telling the stories of my characters and bringing my characters to life far more. And so I don't really have a dream project for any publisher, mostly because that's not my objective.
All right, cool. I respect that totally. I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah. I wrote it. I wrote professionally in the 90s, and I did it for about 3 or 4 years, and I could have gone on, but I was like, I really don't like pitching to editors, and I'd rather just do my own thing, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Oh, yeah, no, I gotta respect that too. It's like, I think because I started so late, the idea of having a comics career just doesn't occur to me anymore. I mean, people ask me stuff a lot. They ask if I'm going to pitch my stuff to Image or try and get a publisher, and I think I came into the game so late in my life. Like I didn't do my first Indy comics till I was 41. I'm 45 now. I just want to tell my stories, man. That's what I'm doing. These are stories. I'm tired of having stories in my head. I'm tired of having unfinished stories that I worked on that never went anywhere. Nobody ever read. I just love being able to make my characters come alive, and I just want to make characters. I want my characters to be the characters that somebody else loves and looks forward to reading their next adventure. And that's what brings me joy.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, everybody, this is JD. This is the awesome Scott. You'll get this information in the show notes. Hit like, hit subscribe, and we'll be talking to you later. Have a good night. JD out.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Scott. Have a good one, man.
All right, bye.
All right, bye, guys.